Are you about to start a podcast or producing a podcast and tired of doing the editing yourself? We have produced over 1,000 daily shows, and the production team that I've created, they're now available to produce shows for you as well. We can do as little or as much as you need, from finding and communicating with guests, preparing introductions, to editing the audio and video. You will sound better, have a more professional presence, and be able to spend your time doing other valuable tasks on your business. Let me know you're interested by emailing me directly at whitney@lifebridgecapital.com.
This is your daily real estate syndication show, and I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today is a highlight show that's packed with value from different guests around a specific topic. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but also go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can sign up to start investing in real estate today. I hope you enjoy the show. Our guest is Trevor Crow. Thanks for being on the show, Trevor.
Hey, Whitney. Thanks for having me.
Trevor founded Crow Legal LLC to deliver sophisticated and practical legal solutions to companies, their founders, and investors, and has done so for the last 10 years. Trevor has extensive experience representing sponsors and investors in syndicated real estate deals. Trevor, thank you again for your time. I'm grateful. Always, just somebody that's willing to come on and share your expertise and been in the business as long as you have. Why don't you give the listeners a little more about, who you are, maybe where you're located, and let's jump into your unique skill set and some qualities that your firm has.
Yeah, sounds good. So Trevor Crow, as Whitney mentioned, and I'm an attorney here in Denver, Colorado, and I kind of grew up in the Denver area for the most part, and went to graduated from law school at Denver University in 2009. Which is not a great year to graduate law school because of the downturn in the market there, but get to learn a lot about how to weather the storm there. So that's been good experience, and been practicing ever since then, doing syndicated real estate deals and other business transactions. And I started at several different firms in Denver, or bounced around to several different firms. And before I started my own firm, this Crow Legal, in February of 2018. And now we're a small boutique business transactions firm focusing on syndicated real estate deals. It's me and two other attorneys. And yeah, we've been doing it through the up and down cycles of real estate. And so it's been a fun ride.
Nice. Well, thanks again. And I would like to just jump in. Before we started recording, you and I were talking a little bit about your firm and just this business in general. And, you were telling me about just some qualities of that your firm has that you felt were very important. And I just thought, okay, let's focus on that, because I know so many of the listeners and myself, I remember, when you're getting started in this business, it can seem pretty overwhelming just building your team and figuring out who those people should be. And one very important just non-negotiable team member is your attorney, and especially your securities attorney, and somebody that's helping you with those legal documents. But so let's just dive right in there, and love for you to elaborate on that a little bit, just the qualities you were talking about your firm and why those are important, and let's jump in.
Yeah. So, I mentioned I was at a couple different firms before starting my own. And the first firm I was at, I did less real estate work and more just business transactions. And so for several entities, just, startup companies, engineering companies, or other sort of software companies, we would sometimes draft entity documents as LLCs. And so with that, we'd have operating agreements. And I thought I knew how to draft operating agreements. And then I went to a real estate firm and practiced there for a while. And I quickly learned that a joint venture real estate operating agreement is way different than a operating agreement for, say, just your typical service type business or operating company. And so I think, from our standpoint, one of our unique abilities is that we understand real estate joint ventures and putting together those operating agreements, which I don't think some people think they do and haven't really dived into it as much as we have. And so it's hard to understand them. But the thing with real estate joint ventures and syndicated deals is, one, you obviously have to understand the securities piece of it and make sure you're not getting your client in hot water there. But the operating agreement itself, because typically, real estate deals are done through operating agreements or limited partnership agreements, mostly most of our deals are LLC agreements. And really it's business term driven. And so, the business terms drive the deal. And, I think a lot of people or some people think that attorneys can just pull an agreement off the shelf and switch out names and they have their agreement there. But it's really not the case here because it is so business term driven. And so you could have 10 deals and the operating agreements for every single one of those deals look far different from the other. So understanding the business of real estate and how this works is huge. And so you really want to have that an attorney who understands that piece of it. And those are going to vary depending on whether it's a ground up development deal. Is it a deal where you're going to buy an existing property, maybe add some value and then flip it? Is it a buy and hold strategy? I mean, all these sort of different business terms have to be memorialized in an operating agreement. And if you don't have that expertise and that knowledge from doing these deals and paying attention to what the market is, you're going to really be behind the eight ball and might miss things, or your attorney might.
Yeah. So, do you have an example or maybe, just like how you all, when you started to draft an operating agreement, why it was so beneficial for you all to understand, say, the deal? I mean, obviously you need to know a lot about the deal when you're drafting these documents because so much of it is unique, is very unique per the structure of the deal, the deal itself, location, all those things, and the team. But any examples of how, it's so crucial that you understood the business and just understood the deal when creating those documents?
For one, we represent both developers, promoters, and I kind of mix those terms together as the people or sponsors. Sometimes the people who are bringing the deal to the table, and then we also represent investors. And so we've been on both sides of the table there and argued on both sides of what should be in the agreements. But for example, we represented a promoter on a deal, and this was early on in my career. And I think it's even more important now thinking about the whole COVID environment and what's going on with that and how there can be downturns. But one of the important provisions that we had in an operating agreement for our client was there was no forced sale provision. And so when there's a downturn in the market, sometimes the best option is to hold, especially if you're the promoter of the deal, because as many of your listeners may or may not know, but the way the promoters get paid, they sometimes get management fees, acquisition fees or other fees that just come off the top, right? But a lot of times their big hit is the promote at the end of the day. So when they sell the property, you return capital, maybe you return a preferred return, and then there's a split, whether it's 80-20, 70-30, whatever it is. And the promoter gets that 30 or 20% pop, which is their big payday, right? They've done all the work. They put all the work into this and they've developed this project and now it's time to sell. And if they sell it for this profit that can cover all the return of capital, preferred return items, then they get this big payday. Well, if it's a downturn in the market and the investors can force the sale, then there could be no promote. Maybe it's just return of capital, preferred return, and a little bit off the top, and investors walk away with money and developers put in all this work and doesn't get the big payday. And so, we've represented clients and had, negotiated hard to get out those forced sale provisions so they can make sure that they're selling in a market that's going to be ideal for them and to actually realize the benefits of it. So it's worthwhile to them to be able to hold on to the property for another year or 18 months or whatever it is to get a better market or whatever, even lease up more or get whatever to get a better cap rate and sell that property so they can actually get paid. And so that's just one example, I think, of where we've helped out our clients to make sure that the business deal is memorialized properly into the agreement.
Or what's a good way to know that our securities attorney understands deals like that? Because I know that, maybe is it just length of time in the business, or is it, maybe they've been part of some deals personally, or what's something you would look for there?
Yeah, well, I think you raised a good point there in the way that you phrased it, because you mentioned securities attorneys, and so you're a securities attorney. And so, you really need somebody, in my mind, either a firm that has somebody that's specialized in securities and then somebody separate who specialized in these, joint venture operating agreements for real estate deals. Or you have somebody, for example, the way I practice, I've done all of that. So when I was at firms, the real estate firm that I was at prior to starting my own, I was the guy who did the operating agreements and all the securities work. And that's the way I've done it. And so you need somebody who understands both sides of it, either whether it's one or multiple people. But understanding the security side and the exemptions is certainly one thing. Understanding the business terms and what to write in that operating agreement is another. And so you want to make sure you want to ask questions about both of those, in my opinion. You want to make sure that you find somebody who not only knows the business side of real estate deals and can draft those operating agreements, but also has the securities expertise to make sure that when you're offering equity interests in a LLC, that you're not running afoul of any of the securities laws.
Would that be something that you would typically have in-house, like both of those things, specialties under one roof with one attorney, or is that something that the listener may have to think about having two different attorneys for?
Certainly, you may have to think about that depending on who you're talking to. Like for our firm, we have both of those expertise in our shop, and so we can handle both elements of that. Larger firms, usually have separate attorneys that have that. Maybe one's doing the securities work and one's doing the operating agreement. But if you're dealing with a smaller shop or just a real estate attorney, there's a lot of times that real estate attorney doesn't do securities work. And so you may want to make sure that they do, or if they don't do it, that they have somebody that does. So for example, we work with other law firms that have real estate clients and that are doing syndicated deals, but they don't do securities work. And so they'll call us and we'll do just the securities work for them. They don't want to, they can do the operating agreement, they do the entity formation stuff, and they're comfortable with that. They're just not comfortable with securities work. And a lot of that boils down to your malpractice policy, because if you check the box that you do securities work to your malpractice insurer as an attorney, they're going to up your malpractice rate. So you're paying more premiums. So unless you're doing a decent amount of that work, it may not make sense to check the box there. And so, and also if you just don't have the competence in that area, you certainly don't want to check the box and try to practice in that area, because there's a lot of pitfalls that can happen there. So yeah, so definitely an inquiry you want to make on both elements of that. And it will vary on firm and by attorneys on whether they have both of those expertise.
Our guest is Stephen Robison. Thanks for being on the show, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
Stephen is a board certified specialist in federal taxation law by the Ohio State Bar Association and president, Strategic Property Exchange, LLC. Ohio Bar Association board certified specialist in federal tax law since 2001, named 6 times Ohio's super lawyer by Law of Politics Media in the area of taxation law from 2003 through 2008. It's impressive. Steve earned his BA degree and his JD degree from the University of Cincinnati and his LLM degree in business and taxation from the University of Bridgeport. Stephen, thanks so much for your time. I know that you're going to provide so much value to the listeners and what we're going to discuss today, but give them a little bit about who you are, what your focus is right now, and let's dive in.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I'm a tax lawyer, and we also have an exchange company. And so when I say exchange company, that means that we help facilitate people who sell real estate, take those proceeds and reinvest them into other real estate so they don't have to pay the tax. And that, of course, is the big thing they love. If you can help someone save, $1 million in tax, so you have a friend for life, and they'll send you Irish whiskey Christmas time every year. So anyway, we handle these property transactions all over the country and overseas as well. And the way, if you had to pinpoint what is that makes us different than other people, is that we will review every document, loan documents, every kind of document, operating agreements, to make sure that what the client wants to achieve is actually achieved. So we're not trying to put off their other advisors like CPAs or lawyers. We're here kind of a second pair of eyes to make sure that what they want to accomplish does in fact get accomplished. Because typically their other advisors have so many other clients that they can't keep on top of these quick changes where someone will call in at 2:45, the closing to 3, by the way, I want to borrow twice as much money. Is that okay? And I want to go to Bimini with the money. Is that okay too? And then you have to talk them off the cliff, right? Okay, no, you can't do that, right? Don't do that. Anyway, so our job is to kind of manage and monitor that process.
Wow. So, you brought up a great point too. I mean, you're reading every document, so you're making sure that what the client wants actually happens. I mean, I know it's common that we don't read all the documents, right? If a PPM, private placement memorandum, is 100 pages, how many people are actually reading that?
Well, they're designed actually so no one wants to read them, right? Because there's actually subliminal go to sleep messages on the pages, right? And you're thinking, is that really an ancient Greek? Gosh, my Greek is kind of rusty. I don't know. So anyway, you have to force yourself to get through that.
Yeah, and a lot of it we wouldn't understand even if we did read it.
That's right. That's right.
So that's why, and that's what you do for people, right? I mean, you are reading those documents because you understand the Greek terminology, and you can explain it and making sure we're protected. Really, we're getting what we're signing up for.
That's right. So we translate it back into like standard English, from words meant to confuse you into something that's basic. And as a consequence, when the real estate market had, let's call it a downturn, right? 11 years ago, our clients had gone into properties like these that were syndicated, and none of our clients had any problems. I mean, none of their properties blew up because we were careful in making sure that they understood what they were getting, and it was a solid investment. There was, I won't name names, right? That's not polite to name names, but some companies went under and the clients suffered greatly, but those were not the ones that we had advised people on.
So can you give us some examples of documents that are like a must to be reviewed by somebody like yourself? If I'm going into under a contract, I'm fixing to sign something, I'm fixing to invest. What are some documents that are like, okay, I definitely need to contact somebody like yourself to review?
So a good example, right off the bat, of course, you have the purchase and sale agreement, which of course everybody would be looking at. But then the second one, let's say, is the operating agreement. So we had this recently. We had a sale of a property in Texas. And in the operating agreement, there was two kinds of payouts. And there was a payout while the property was operating, which benefited the managers. And then there was a payout for the owners when the property was sold, where there was a 10% swing in the payout. And so then the accountant had not picked up on that. So on the tax return, he showed a higher payout for the managers rather than a higher payout for the owners. And so when we were reading through it, we noticed that the client was entitled to an additional 10% of the sale proceeds, right? A big number, right? Because I think the property sold for $20 million or something. And so we were like, no, see the words here? It says he gets more, right? And that, of course, was a big stink when we discovered that. Another example is the loan documents, right? Where they say, I'm going to borrow $1 million. And you say, that's great. That's just the right amount you need for your exchange. But then you read the loan document. It says, no, I'm borrowing $10 million, right? And I'm actually using the money to create a gold straddle partnership in the Ukraine, right? And he's like, no, wait, you can't borrow that additional money on this exchange because it's not going to the property. So, loan documents, another example of tedious, boring documents you have to read. Operating agreements, other side agreements that suddenly appear out of nowhere. We have a side agreement. Can I see that? And then, heretofore undiscovered document shows up.
So a side agreement, would that be something like, we get the contract, whatever it may be, but then 2 weeks later we get this side agreement that
right. It's side agreement that it might say something like, I'm going to give 10% of the profits to a developer or something, or someone who was involved in it originally. And so many times what we'll say is, well, that's okay as long as it's treated as a profits interest, because that can be treated as a sale expense. And as so you don't have to worry about, do I now suddenly have a partner in the deal that I didn't know I had before, and then they would have to go forward into the new deal and they don't want to. And so again, it's kind of addressing who gets what and what does this mean.
So who's your typical client? Is it going to be syndicators and passive investors, or is it going to be mostly passive investors?
Yeah, so it's going to be owners of real estate, and they could either be in the form of an entity like a partnership or a trust or whatever it might be, or in their individual names, and they could be people that are that are much older, and then they're looking to, in the case of syndication, let's say for example the husband's passed away and the wife wants to sell her 40 apartment buildings and she wants to buy something that does not involve management. So it should be a typical investor going into a passive investment. Or people who inherited property years ago. It was very common when the estate tax was much higher that people were gifting property left and right. So now they own this property since 1980 at a very low basis, and now they're selling it because they're getting a good deal. But they don't want to manage the property. They have no understanding of how to manage property. They might be an orthodontist in Pasadena, California, right? They have no desire to manage property.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com, where you can start investing in real estate today.